Okay, we are live. Thank you, Tova, for coming along today. This is our sixth webinar in our Job Seeker series. If you've missed any of the previous sessions and you want to watch them, I'll pop the link in the chat. And you can also register for any future sessions using the same link. We've also got group coaching every Friday morning and one-to-one mentor sessions that you can book in as well. A big thank you on that note to everybody that's volunteered to host a session like Tova has today and people that have volunteered for coaching and mentoring. Tova is going to chat to us for 25 minutes-ish around how to ace that interview. But what we'd really love is for you to interrupt and ask questions as we go. So any questions, comments, pop them in the chat and we'll bring them on screen and we'll answer them as they come through. If there's nothing until the end, then I'll definitely ask some questions if people don't get in, and you can always just pop some extra questions in there as well. Last thing from me, we will be recording these sessions, so I will share the recording with everybody afterwards as well. So Tova, big thank you for coming today and for sharing your expertise. I'll hand over to you.
Great. Thanks, Laura. Hey, everyone. Wish I could see you, but I can't see you. This is actually my first time on LinkedIn Live. So really excited to be with you all, and especially to be talking about how to ace your interviews. My name is Tova Angsawat, and I'm the founder of a new recruiting agency called Series Build, which is all about helping startups and scale-ups help find the best, greatest talent that they need, and especially in how to bring more diversity and representation into the startup ecosystem. Previous to this, I was at Google for the last almost 11 years across people and culture, and leading teams of 45 plus or so of recruiters, both in the US and across APAC, who've hired about 2,000 people. So I love the recruiting space. I love working with talent and really helping people find roles where they can have great meaning and impact. So this is what I love to do. So if you're a job seeker, please feel free to reach out to me. Would love to help you, hear what you're looking for, see if I can help find you something great. And if you work for a company and you're hiring, would love to help you hire some amazing talent. So that's a little bit about my background. If you are dialing in, you are likely in the interview process or looking to get into the interview process. And so I'm going to walk through kind of 5 different steps of things to think through, kind of the research piece, knowing yourself, how to prepare, thinking about kind of the day of, and then all of the extra little bits that are important. But I think the first thing is kind of your mindset going into this is, if you are invited to an interview, that means you've already passed the hard hurdles. You've already gotten past the CV screen. You've already gotten in front of someone. They are already interested in you to take the time to interview you. So yay, congratulations. Like, that's a win, and celebrate that win. Also, remember that every hiring manager who interviews you wants you to be a fit. They are rooting for you. They want to fill their role. They want to fill their role with someone who's great, and they are hoping it's going to be you. So your job in the interview is to help show them how you are a fit for what they need and help see that. And just overall, remember, you deserve to be there. So whether you are in a role and you're looking for a change, whether you've been a part of massive layoffs like so many people have, whether you've left the workforce for any number of reasons and you're looking to get back in, you deserve to be there. So with that, let's pop into the different steps of how to get ready and how to ace that interview. And again, please jump in with any questions in the chat. So first step is research. This is where a lot of people surprisingly fall flat. Like, maybe they'll go to the company's website, maybe they know someone who works there, but you really do want to spend your time getting to know this company. What do they do? What are their challenges? What's recent news about them? There's almost always a lot out there. Maybe employees have posted things. Maybe the company has posted things. Read about what's going on in the company. Also, understand the role. And this is something where a lot of people will read the job description, apply for the job, get the interview, and then forget all about that job description. Hopefully, the company has spent, the hiring managers have spent a lot of time thinking about that job description, and you want to really understand what they're looking for, because everything about that interview is not just about you, it's about how you fit into that role. So really try to understand what they're looking for. And if you have a conversation with a recruiter before your interview, ask them all those questions. The recruiters also, they want to see you fit. They want to see you win. So ask them all the questions that you have about the role, about the timing, about how the role fits with the other teams, about the challenges. Get all of your questions answered, and recruiters are really great people to ask a lot of those questions too. So you research the company, you understand the role. It's also really good to understand the industry, especially if you're coming in at a mid or senior level. They want to see that you understand the bigger picture. So know the industry, know what's going on, know some news or trends, and get curious, understand that industry. And then the last piece is you want to know your interviewers. At most companies, not all, but at most companies, they will tell you who you're going to be interviewing with. Again, ask your recruiter. Ask your recruiter what they're looking for in the interview and who you're interviewing with. And then do your research. Look them up. Obviously, look on LinkedIn, Google them, look at what they've posted, look at what they're interested in, and really get to know them inside and outside of work, anything you can get to know. So that's kind of the research piece. Again, if you have questions about that, pop it into the chat and we can talk through it. Second piece is know yourself. So this is maybe obvious, but does take a bit of introspection and a bit of work. You really do want to take the time, and maybe you've done this before your job search, to really know yourself, know your strengths, know what you're good at, know what you love, and then you have to know how to talk about that. And with each interview, it's going to be a little bit different because each role is going to be different. So you want to think about, what is that feeling that you want to have those interviewers walk away feeling about you? How do you want them to feel about you? And what do you want them to think about you? And then you want to be able to bring your best self, all those skills and attributes, to how you present your story. So again, think about that. Do you want them to think that you are you're someone who can wear lots of hats? Do you want them to know that you can handle yourself, handle ambiguity really well, or you can move quickly, or you love collaborating with stakeholders, or you are just such a go-getter when it comes to going after clients and selling? How do you want them to think about you? And then that's how you're going to craft your story. And almost always you're going to get the "tell me about yourself" type of question at the beginning. That's your opportunity to tell your story. Now, you don't want it to be super long. It's probably about 60 seconds or so, but you want to tell your story. And what your story shouldn't be is, it shouldn't just be you reciting the different steps in your CV, all the different roles that you've had, and then where you are today. That's not what your story should be. Your story should be based on what the end goal is. That, how do you want them to feel and think about you? What are they looking for in your role? And what is the story that you're telling? I mean, of course it's true. Of course it's the stuff that you've done, but the story that you're telling about your experience, that at the end of it, they think, well, obviously this person should be in this role. Help make those connections so that it is so clear. And what's really good is that each of those kind of different pieces of your history, when you're telling that story, is to talk about the impact you had, talk about what you learned, ways that you grew. But think about that story. It's not just you regurgitating your CV. It's you painting that picture to help them understand how you're a good fit. And the last piece of your story that I think is really interesting, that a lot of people leave out, but as a hiring manager, I love hearing, is why this role, and why this role right now. So you've told them your story, you've painted this picture of kind of where you've come and how your skills are an obvious fit for what they're looking for, but why this role and why now? Help them make that connection. This is really important for people who are making career switches, who are transitioning industries or functions. If you've been on a break for a little while, really help them understand why this role and why now. So that is all about knowing yourself. And it takes some time. You're going to sit down and you're going to jot down a bunch of notes, and maybe you go to a cafe and you do it, or you put on some headphones. I also really love sharing this back with people that know you well. So maybe it's your partner or family or good friends, but say, these are the strengths I have. This is how I love to work. These are what I think are highlights from my past. These are where I think it'll tie in really well to these roles. What do you think? And ask for their feedback. So often your friends and family and people who are close to you will tell you things about yourself that you forgot about, or you overlook, or you take for granted that that's a strength because it comes really easy. So use the people in your network who you trust to really dig into what makes you you. So that's the piece about knowing yourself. Again, pop any questions in the chat if you have them. But we talked about researching the company and knowing yourself.
Can I ask a couple of questions there?
Yeah, go for it.
I was just going to ask one, or actually one on strengths. So I think sometimes it's really difficult, as you said, to know what you're good at. Have you got any tools or tips around what's the best way to like know what your strengths are, or you've got lots of strengths, like Gallup strength tests, like any of those that you could recommend?
Yeah, I mean, lots of people have done, Gallups and, all the Strengths Finder, all those different assessments. Those are great. The other thing is most people have gone through some kind of performance review before. So look back at your performance review, look back at your 360 feedback. What did your managers and your peers, what did people say you did great? What were the things that you did and how you did it? So it wasn't just like, oh, she blew this project out of the water and it had a great outcome. What was it? Was it that you collaborated with cross-functional stakeholders really well? Was it that you had to influence on a really tricky topic? Like, how did you have the impact that you had? And what was the feedback that you heard from other people? Is that people loved working with you because you solicited lots of viewpoints and then you brought together a really tricky problem into distilling it into very clear objectives. So, what is it what feedback are you getting from other people? So that's the kind of, what are you great at? And then there's some work to do around, what do you love? What brings you energy? And I love to think back on, when were you at your best at work? Like, what was your favorite moment? Who were you with and where was it? And, were you working by yourself? Were you working with others? Was it something tricky? Was it something fast paced? Was it deep work? When were you at your best, to figure out the work that you love and then marry that with all of that feedback and your reflections on what you're great at.
I love that. Thank you. And then the other one I was going to ask, just in terms of your story, should you be tailoring that story based on the job, or should you have like a fairly consistent story on like who you are, your strengths, and what you're looking for?
So it's similar to a CV. You have your standard CV that has all your history, but you want to tailor your CV and you want to tailor that who you are to every role. So I will have my standard 60, 90 seconds who I am, and you want to practice it and practice it and practice it in the shower with friends, on walking your dog. You always want to practice it, but you definitely want to tailor it for the job you're going after, because there are lots of things about my background that, depending on the role I'm going into, they don't care about. Like, that's nice, that's interesting, good for you, but they don't care about. And it's not about you, it's about them. It's about, what do they need in this role? How do you help them realize you're a fit? So you definitely want to tailor your story to the work that you did. So there are some roles where all of the work I've done has been obvious that this role I've applied to is the next role. But there have been some roles where I'm like, this is a little bit of a departure from what I've done before. They're going to have to take a little bit of a leap of faith. I'm going to have to help them make that mental jump. So in my story, I'm really going to anchor on that one role I had that is that closest connection, and the what I did and how I did and why I loved it and how I grew. And again, you don't want to talk for too long, but really thinking about tailoring that for sure.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great.
Carry on.
No, it's great. Thanks. So we talked about the research, knowing yourself. Both of these are continuous. You'll always keep working on the knowing yourself, on refining. The 60, 90 second kind of tell me about yourself piece. This is a really good thing to practice when you're like out at a party or meeting people for a coffee, and you're meeting a new friend. Oh, tell me about yourself. Or like, oh, hey, Tova, like, what are you up to? And you're like, I can practice. Just use those lots of opportunities to practice, because what you're going to find is, depending on who you're talking to, different people are going to touch on and they're going to connect with different parts of your story. And so thinking about, ooh, wow, they actually found that part really interesting. That's cool. Okay. Oh no, wow, they were really surprised by that. Or, oh, they didn't really understand that part. So again, practice all the time, and in lots of low pressure situations. So next piece is, so you've researched, you know yourself, now you got to prep for the actual interview. This is where it can start to feel a little bit overwhelming because you can't anticipate every question that they might ask you, and you can't, make your notes and write all of that down. But there are a couple simple ways to prepare. One is you almost always know you're going to get that tell me about yourself question. So always prepare that one and make sure you nail it. You also want to nail it because it's at the beginning of the interview. And everything at the beginning of the interview makes a big difference. We know that people are anchored on things that happen right at the beginning, and we make really quick decisions about people. And we'll talk a little bit about how to use that to your advantage later. But you want to really nail that tell me about yourself. The other thing that I really like to do is go in and think about 5 or 6 stories that you can tell and really work on those stories. Write them down, think through them, practice them out loud, and think through the different aspects. And you want to use kind of the context, action, result framework, CAR, context, action, result. What was the context? What was the action you took? And what was the result? Like, what was the impact? And tell those stories. And the reason why you want to, in your head, know those 5 or 6 stories like the back of your hand is that way, anytime you get a question that you weren't anticipating, you can think, this might fit into one of these 5 or 6 stories. Oh, was there a challenging teammate that I had to work with? Was there some mistake that I might have made? Was there something I had to do for the first time that I'd never done before? All those different things that you get, you can build them into the stories that you know really well. So think through your stories, practice your stories, and have them kind of in your pocket as tools for your interview. And again, think about what they need in the role. So this is where the prep comes in, is your story. You might know how you talked about that project that you worked on and the impact that it had. But what does the interviewer need for this role? Do they need a collaborator? Do they need a creator? Do they need an operator? What do they need? And you want to highlight the parts of your story that resonate with what they need. So again, keep thinking about their experience and what's important to them. And practice these stories out loud. It's super awkward. It's awkward, but just do it. You got to do it. You got to practice it because you're going to be doing it eventually when you're in the interview. You can do it by yourself and you can do it with other people. It's really helpful to do it with other people. Again, similar to that tell me about yourself background, because people can catch where you're being modest. And that's one of the biggest pitfalls that people fall into when interviewing, especially women, especially people from underrepresented backgrounds, tend to undersell themselves. So interviewing is not the time to be modest. You want to put your best self forward. And when you practice out loud and when you tell these stories and you talk about the impact that you had, when you do them out loud with someone, they can point out to you, oh, I think you're underselling yourself here, or I think that you could share more. I think you're being modest. So those are some of the pieces that are really important when preparing. And don't overthink it. Don't stress yourself out, because the last thing you want is to go into the interview so nervous of like, oh, I'm trying to remember all these things. Just be in it. You want to just be in the moment and go in, which kind of leads us into that day of. So it's like, all right, you've done all your prep, you've gone to the interview, yay. Now, day of, what do you do? So my favorite, everyone has a different approach to this. Take it or leave it, try a bunch, see what resonates with you. My favorite thing to do before an interview or a presentation or an important client meeting is you've got to find a way to pump yourself up. So you do your pump up. You can, I have my favorite song, which is Kesha, Raising Hell. You listen to your music, you recite your mantras to yourself, you power pose, where you like strike like a big, powerful pose, hold it, whatever it is that gets you feeling like you are the badass that you are. And you've got to remember that. Again, they want you to be a fit. It's like going on a date. You really hope when you date that you're going to meet the person that you want to be with. The hiring manager wants you to be the one. So pump yourself up, get in that mindset. And it's so important that when you enter the room or the virtual room, that you are coming in with that confidence. You really want to own it. And the physical part matters too. So it used to be that, I'm always very, very cold. And I used to sit in meetings and I'd like hunch my shoulders and I'd kind of cross my arms and I'd lean over. And I was once talking to this friend of mine, and he was like, Tova, you've got to take up space. You've got to like be confident, own your space, like take up space. And I'm like, no, I'm just really cold. And he's like, so put on a sweater and take up some space. And it was such a good reminder. I had no idea that you have to like go in and sit up tall and take a deep breath and take up your space. You deserve to be there. So, and how you enter that room, how you first appear is so important. And this is where we all have biases. And I work a lot with hiring managers to try to help identify and remove bias in the process and point these out. But we know people have biases, and we know that people make very quick decisions about people. And oftentimes we'll make a decision about someone in the first 60 to 90 seconds of meeting them. So if you have a 45-minute interview, you might be stressing for those 45 minutes, but the interviewer might have made up their mind about you right away. It's not good. We'd all like to work against those biases. But if you know that people have these biases, what can you do to take advantage of this? You want to come in strong in the beginning. You don't want to use the first 5 minutes for you to warm up. You warm up off camera. You warm up before you enter the room. It's like you're walking on stage, or you're walking onto like a field to play an important game. You do your warm up before and you come in strong, because they're going to make their opinion about you and make a decision really quickly. That also means have the small talk. Have the small talk where you connect on something and where you show your confidence and where you show how you can connect with them and have them like you, which is really important. And then you move into all of these other pieces. So, we talked about the don't be too modest. Remember, it's not bragging when it's based on fact. And so often, and again, this is especially women, oftentimes people from underrepresented backgrounds will use we a lot more than I, and much more so than men will often do. Is you talk about a project and you'll say, well, we did this. And I find myself doing this a lot too. I'll say, oh, well, we did this. And then I realize I was the only one on it, or I was the project lead. There wasn't even a team behind me or a team with me on that thing. It was actually just me, but I'm still using the word we. The interviewers need to know what you did and what impact you had. I mean, same thing goes with performance reviews. People need to know what you did. They're hiring you for the role. So keep that in check. That's another reason why it's really good to practice out loud. It's good to practice with people, but watch your language and what you're doing and really think about how you can do that. So that's all the day of stuff. When you go in there, so much of this is about your mindset. Whatever you need to tell yourself, whatever mantra or, pounding on your chest, doing the power posing, really pump yourself up and remember that you deserve to be there. So the last piece are some of these extras. It's so important, you're going to go in there and you're going to be so focused on answering their questions and being articulate and not talking for too long. Don't go on and on and on with your answers. Finish your answer and stop. You're going to be doing all of these things, but also remember to be curious. Go in there really curious, not only curious about how they see things, what they think about, what their challenges are, but also just kind of curious about the company. Because yes, it's kind of like interviewing is kind of like being on The Bachelor, in that it feels very one way. Like you're just waiting for them to give you a rose like each round, and like every round you get another rose. And then at the end, you get to decide if you like them back. So it is two-way. You do want to be curious and explore and see, is this what I want? Is this a fit for me also? So be really curious. I think in being curious also, you want to prepare interesting questions. You will always, and you know how you'll always get the tell me about yourself? You will also always get the at the end, do you have any questions for me? And of course, you're always going to prepare questions, but don't have them be generic questions. Don't have them be, like, what's keeping you up at night? I mean, it's fine, but it's not that interesting. Like, ask them something that shows them you know about their business, that shows them you know about the challenges of the role. It's not just what keeps them up at night. There might be a challenge that they have with roles like this, or at their stage of company, or with what's going on in the industry. So prepare interesting, thoughtful questions to ask. And after every interview, when it ends, you always also want to follow up. So sometimes you can do that with the recruiter, with the interviewer directly, if you have their contact info. Sometimes you have to go through the recruiter, but follow up in a thoughtful way. So you want to be able to reflect back on something you guys talked about, something you said, something that they mentioned, something that you thought was interesting. This is also, I love this as a tool for if you feel like you really messed up an interview question or you really missed something and you leave and you're just like, ugh, I can't believe I forgot to mention, customer conversations, whatever it is. It's also a nice way of weaving that in to say, oh, and I was thinking more when we were talking about this, about how much I love doing this, this, and this, or how important this piece is, or just to kind of let them know about that step that you might have forgotten about. So you can always weave that into your follow-up as well. And don't expect them to necessarily respond to you, but it is nice. And people who interview will note, oh, yeah, that was a nice follow-up. That was thorough. That was thoughtful. And it shows how you follow through. And on that same note of when you feel like you make mistakes, be really easy on yourself. Of course, you'll say things that you didn't think landed very well, or weren't very articulate, or you totally forgot something, or you didn't have a good answer to that. And I'm sure you'll go through all of those things in your mind, because so many of us do. But also, you're probably not going through all of the great answers you had, and all the times that the interviewer was nodding along or saying, oh, yeah, or I totally agree. Don't forget about the great things you did, and don't over anchor all of your mind share on the things that you didn't do well. Be easy on yourself. And every interview is an opportunity to practice and to learn something. So every interview, every conversation is an opportunity just to get more and more practice. It makes you better. And irrespective of the outcome, you might get the role, you might not get the role, but you've gotten a chance to practice. And if you're curious through the process, you've also probably learned quite a bit about the company, about the industry, about the role, which will set you up even better for the next one. So be curious, explore, and be easy on yourself. So often you might not get a role, and it might not have anything to do with you. The timing might be right, might not be right. They might be further along with another candidate. They may have an internal candidate who they've already progressed with. They may decide to change the role. They may, through the interview process, decide they're actually looking for something different, and you would have been great for what they were originally looking for, but now they're looking for something else. So be easy on yourself. It's not always personal, and everything is an opportunity for learning. And if you don't get the role, it's totally fair to ask the recruiter or the hiring manager for any feedback. Hey, I've loved going through this process with you. I've loved learning about your company. I'm so excited about what you're building. I'm sorry that it didn't work out for this role, but is there any feedback that you have for me on things that I can do to come back even stronger or be a better fit next time? So you can always ask for feedback along the way. Let me pause there, because that was a lot. We talked through researching, preparing yourself, prepping the day of, and how to be ready and on the day of, and then some of these extras. But let me just see if there are any questions on chat or anything that people have that they want to chime in with.
I've got one while we wait for chat. Just on feedback. Sorry, not feedback, on the follow-up. Too many F's. I had a friend who went for an interview a little while ago, and we were talking about follow-up. So he followed up afterwards and said, it was great, and offered some insight and asked for next steps. Didn't hear anything back. And then wanted to follow up again, but was like, how many times do you follow up? So yes, there's two questions. One, how long do you leave it the first time before you follow up? Is that something you should do straight away afterwards, or you should leave a bit of time? And then how appropriate it is to follow up again if you haven't heard anything, but you're really keen on this role and you want to know where you stand.
Yeah. So with the first follow-up, which is just like a quick thank you, I'd say follow up quickly, like within the first 24 hours or so. It's really nice while it's fresh in their mind. Also, interviewer feedback is usually fresh in the first 24 hours. So if you're ever on the interviewer side, get your notes in that first day when it's freshest, and you have You don't have all the latency of it. But so yeah, follow up quickly. Oftentimes you might not hear, and then it is appropriate to follow up again. I would definitely give it a couple days, at least 3 or 4, maybe a week. And after you've followed up that next time, and if they still don't respond, I'd let it go. Again, think of it kind of like dating. You don't want to be that overly eager person who's like, please date me, please date me, please date me. I really like you. I really like you. But that person might have just like lost your messages or didn't get to it or really wanted to get to it and then moved on to something else. So don't assume that their first lack of response is because they don't like you or they're not interested. It may just be that business and life has gotten in the way. I had a situation recently where I was chatting with someone and like everything was sounding really, really good. And then things went radio silent. And I followed up. And I think I followed up again because we were supposed to connect. And it was like radio silent, radio silent, radio silent. And then they came back and they're like, oh, so sorry, I was out with COVID. Like, you never know what's going on. So it's totally appropriate to follow up again if you don't hear after the first time, and to show your excitement. I mean, it's like your friend. Tell them how excited you are, and then reinforce something. So it should be more than like, super excited, can't wait to connect with you again. There should be something about, oh, I just saw this article, or I just wrapped up this project that had, reminded me of what we spoke about, and tie it again back into what they're looking for and remind them gently about how you're a great fit for it.
That's great. And then feedback, I was gonna say next Wednesday, we've got a coach, Angela, doing a session on feedback from interviews, because obviously that can be a little bit of a minefield sometimes too. So anyone that's interested in that's next Wednesday.
Cool. Yes, so good. Awesome. I'm curious for folks who are on, like, what are the things that stress you out about interviews, or what are the things that you're like, can I ask that? Or I don't know if I can ask that question. What are the things that you're always curious about, or from the perspective of a recruiter, what we're looking for? So actually, please feel free to pop questions in the comments. Work with external tips for how to work with them. And now being on the side as an external recruiter, there are 2 very different types of candidates who I speak to. One being, I'll tell you the difference. The first type of candidate is the type of candidate who is exploring, and they're not really sure what they want to do. They're not really sure about the roles. They might have that feeling of like, well, I want to work for a company that has impact, or I want to work for a great manager, or I want to know that my work matters. I want to work with great people, which are fabulous things to know about yourself. They're not helpful for someone who's helping to look for a job for you. And when you go out and you're talking to friends and family or recruiters and they want to help you, you really do need to be specific about what you're looking for. So when I get into conversations with those types of job seekers, it ends up being more of a coaching conversation we talk about the times when they were at their best. We talk about the types of work that brings them lots of energy. We talk about those things, and then I can help say, this sounds a little bit like this. This sounds like it could be that. Do you prefer to be internal facing or external facing? Do you like a lot of collaboration, or do you like to do heads down work? And we get into it, and then I can help coach them into, these are the types of roles that I think would help you thrive. Once you're at that stage though, and if you've done that work as a recruiter, the job seekers who I'm able to help the best are the ones who say to me, this is what I'm great at. This is where I can add the most value. It's these types of companies. It's these types of roles. It's this type of work. It's this stage. And being really clear, because then I can say, yeah, I know a company like that, or I know a role like that. Or when stuff comes up, I can say, I know someone who'd be perfect for that. So the more focused and specific you can be, the more helpful it is to a recruiter. Poonam, I see a question from Poonam here asking about growth in the role. So do you mean asking about, like, asking the recruiter or the hiring manager for growth in the role? You can comment in, but I think maybe that's what you mean. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people who want to know, who want to grow, are people who you want to hire into your company. So I think what will turn people off is asking about promotion and how quickly you can kind of get to that next level and what the path to that next level looks like. But to say learning and growing is super important to me. And I've continued to find ways to do that in my previous roles. Can you tell me a little bit about what growth might look like here and what opportunities there might be to continue to expand my scope and expand my impact? So absolutely. And what that looks like, and even what career paths might look like. I'd love to be here long term. I love this. I love what you're doing with this company. I want to be a part of helping to continue to build and grow this. Can you tell me about what that could look like in the long term? So yeah, Poonam, absolutely. Definitely ask about that. I would just advise stay away from anything that sounds like promotion, because it's those people that often will set off red flags of, okay, well, they'll take this job, but they're just going to be gunning for the next thing. Odette's question. Hi, Tova. I'm interviewing for a role that's too junior for me, but at a company I love. How can I convince them to create a more senior role for me, or am I just wasting their time? Oh, yes. Good question. And this happens a lot. It totally depends on the company and how big or small. Often, and there are some trends that you see with smaller companies versus bigger companies with this, whereas sometimes smaller companies will have a little bit more flexibility to bring in the right people and just let you grow and expand into having the impact you want. Oftentimes, big companies shouldn't bring you in at a level that's too junior for you. So if they're interviewing for you for a role, they really should level you appropriately. And they shouldn't let you come into a level that is too junior for you. If you're interviewing at a mid-size company or so and it's too junior, look, it's great to get that interview and it's great to get in front of them and put your best foot forward of all the ways that you can have impact. What might happen is they might say, wow, Odette's amazing. And I think that this role is a little bit too small for what Odette could do. And you can talk to them about ways. And if they do come back and say that, you could talk about ways that you can expand that. And you can even say, oh, it sounds like the role is really focused on this, this, and this. I can do all of those. Essentially, I can do all of those things, and I can help in these other ways that the role could be expanded to. So it may be, especially with smaller and maybe mid-sized companies, you can help them paint the picture of what's possible, because they may not know. They may have an idea of, oh, we need a junior social media content manager, but you could help them see what's possible. So take the interview. It's not wasting their time. It's fine. And take the interview, go in there and help them paint that picture. And Odette, comment if there's more to it that I can elaborate on. Ruth, question. Hi, Tova. Second interview with a hiring manager scheduled for only a half hour. Stressed out about what does that look like, and answer questions efficiently. Yeah, Ruth, I mean, a half hour is a really quick one. I think the thing to really focus on here is your answers will need to be really succinct. Get to the point right away. They ask you a question, you get to the point. If it's a behavioral question of, tell me about a time when, don't spend a lot of time on the context and the story, what you did, what is the impact that you have, the role that you played, how that played out. Really get to it succinctly so that they can make sure to get through their questions so that anything on their mind is answered in that 30 minutes. Because what you don't want to have happen with a short interview or with really long-winded answers in general is that they leave the interview and they're like, that was nice, but I don't have a strong enough signal on this person. So with a short interview, get to your answers really quickly and be very succinct. Odette, yeah, no problem. Thanks. These are great. These are really great questions. I guess maybe to elaborate a little bit on Odette's question about if the role is too junior, sometimes I'll also hear questions of the role is kind of what I'm looking for, but kind of not what I'm looking for. Should I even go for it? So this is a conversation to have with the recruiter and to really tell your story. And again, tell them all the ways that you can fulfill what they need and go into all the other things that you can do and the ways that you can have impact, and see if they would be interested in exploring that. They might say, nope, the role is just boxed into these things. And then you decide if you want to move forward or not. But they might say, That's interesting. Yeah, maybe talk to the hiring manager about that. Or, yeah, the team is in a state of change right now. Who knows what might happen? So, definitely explore things. And I guess the other piece of that is when you read job descriptions. Sometimes job descriptions are written very thoughtfully, and there is an art to writing good job descriptions. Um, but oftentimes they're not written all that well. And one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of companies will make is they'll write job descriptions with like a million requirements. Know that the research shows, and many of you might know this, is that, and I'm curious in the chat, does anyone know when women look at job descriptions, what percentage of the requirements they often feel that they need to meet before applying for a job? Just like pop a number in the chat. When you look at a job description, what percentage of those requirements will women often feel like they need to meet before they feel comfortable applying? And I'll give you a hint. It's pretty high. Women will often want to meet close to 100% of the requirements of a job description before they apply to a job. Kate, 100%. Yeah, exactly. Ruth, 100%. Yeah, they will. I think there's a little bit of a delay here. So I'm seeing the comments pop up, but yeah, they do. And men, and maybe I'll give it a little bit longer. What percentage do you think men will often want to meet before they apply for a role? I'll give you a hint. It's lower than 100. men men will often want to meet like 650. Yeah. Yeah, it's actually about 60% of the requirements. So know that there are male peers who are applying for roles when they think they meet about 60% of the requirements, and female peers who are waiting to meet about 100% of the requirements. And when I say female, the research was done with a male female gender lens, but we know gender is not binary. If you are underrepresented, whether it's because of your gender or for another reason, we know the research will show that you will be less likely to apply for a role if you don't meet all of the requirements. Go for it. You have a 100% chance of not getting the job if you don't apply. So apply for the job. Put yourself out there. Worst, let them tell you you're not the right fit. Don't opt out if you're interested in the role and if you're interested in the company. So just go for it. And again, once you get this interview, I mean, which is what we're talking about today, once you get that interview, like you've passed so many of those hurdles. You've made it past the CV screen. You've made it past potentially a recruiter. You've gotten their time. You're worthy. So don't forget it. That's awesome. Any other questions about the interview process? How to think about it? What's going through the minds of hiring managers or recruiters? Okay. Well, this was great. I mean, I loved getting the chance to talk through this with you all. Again, for folks who are in the job hunt at the moment, if there are questions that come up, things that you think of, please feel free to find me on LinkedIn. There aren't that many Tovas, so even if you only remember Tova, there aren't that many Tovas out there. So find me, shoot me a mess, connect with me, shoot me a message. Let me know if I can help you in any way. And of course, for any companies hiring, also would love to help think about how you can bring in the best talent, remove bias, and bring more diversity to your teams.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tova. I've put Tova's LinkedIn URL in the section as well. So although she's easy to find, there is the link there, so you can make sure. Thank you for today. It's been really, really helpful. So thanks so much.
Pleasure. All right. Good to see you all, and look forward to connecting with you at some point soon.